Hello, the sports fans. It's Jack from Heroes of, and in this episode, I want to talk about soundtracking your game. I'm actually playing a soundtrack right now, which is Excalibur. We'll get to that in a minute on vinyl, so that's playing in the background. But what I want to talk about is soundtracking your games, providing music for the role-playing games that you are playing. I personally have been doing it since the early 90s. And it wasn't easy. It's something that I had to do by having a collection of soundtracks. So I would buy CDs and either make mixed CDs with various tracks or just play a soundtrack in the background, and away we went. Prior to this, in my experience with some role-playing games, we would play whatever we wanted, which is probably a topic that we'll cover, like if you're into rock and roll and hip hop, and what kind of genres of music are good background music to play while gaming. But for now, today, we're going to do movie soundtracks and film scores. I thought I'd show you a few of my favorites on vinyl that I've collected over the years. Let me see if I can get this video turned around. Okay, so here's Conan the Barbarian on vinyl. By Basil Pouladuri. I'm not sure how to say that, probably butchering that horribly. But Conan the Barbarian, definitely one of my favorite soundtracks growing up. If you haven't heard it, definitely check it out. It's an amazing soundtrack. If you don't end up using it in game, it'll definitely inspire you, but I think it's got some wonderful tracks on it for your games. Another one that I have is The Lord of the Rings. This is from the animated Lord of the Rings, which I personally love. I think it's great. I think it's wonderfully acted and very interestingly animated for its time. It's a shame that they weren't able to complete it when they wanted to. There was a continuation, of course, but I love this soundtrack. I think it's really great. The vinyl is really cool. Of course, we're going to talk about Lord of the Rings, Howard Shore, with the modern Peter Jackson films. We will get to that, but right now I'm just showing you a few things I've got on vinyl. Captain Blood. So this I picked up, just a swashbuckling old record, the classic film from starring Errol Flynn. I picked it up because I was doing a pirate game, and I wanted to just hear some classic sort of swashbuckling music. So Captain Blood, I was listening to this while writing a few bits for that game. This is one of my personal favorites. So Star Wars, of course, if you're role-playing Star Wars, you're going to be playing Star Wars soundtracks. And there are many to choose from. This is my favorite film. And this particular vinyl I love because it's a double record. It's beautifully, sort of, I guess, illustrated with these wonderful pictures from the film, and this picture book that you can sort of flip through and read and get nostalgic, going right back to 1980. This is a wonderful vinyl to have in anybody's collection, and a great soundtrack. So certainly if you're role-playing science fiction, I'm sure you can use Star Wars soundtracks for your games. Another one I've got here, Indiana Jones. So these soundtracks are great. John Williams, of course, once again. They're really great. I find them hard to use in games because the score erupts into the Indiana Jones theme. And of course that, unless you're making that theme about the characters or a character in your game, I find it maybe a bit too visual or representative of the film. So not able to use it all the time. I do have a copy of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is really cool. Don't seem to have... No, I do not have The Last Crusade. Okay, this film, The Dark Knight Rises, Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. Of course, everybody knows how amazing it is. And what you may or may not know is how useful Hans Zimmer's score is with this Batman trilogy for your Dungeons and Dragons games. I find the music very, very compelling. And it is... definitely a go-to of mine from Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, and The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. This one was given to me as a gift by one of the heroes, so thanks, Jay. Appreciate it. And yeah, big go-to of mine, Hans Zimmer, great composer. We're going to talk about more about him in a minute. The last one I have here in vinyl to show you is Excalibur. This is an example of how you can have classical composers, in this case largely of Wagner and Orff, in a film, and have it re-recorded and have it fit the music. This is a great movie for anybody who's into Dungeons and Dragons or sword and sorcery kind of flair. Definitely check it out. I highly recommend it. So I think we'll go from here, and I'll switch to going back over to my CD collection. Just hang on. Okay, so here we are in a different part of my basement, and this is where I dungeon master from, in my basement. And I've got a CD tower here I want to show you. So this is the tower that I've been collecting CDs for soundtracks and film scores over the last 20 years. I filled it up with a lot of different stuff, and I've pulled out a bunch of CDs that I kind of want to go over with you that are some of my favorites. The Crow, the soundtrack and the film score, amazing. Check it out. Bourne Supremacy, any of the Bourne films, great action music in those, especially if you're doing some like desert sort of adventures. Highly recommend that one. Lord of the Rings, we talked about it just previously about the vinyl. This is the motion picture score by Howard Shore for Peter Jackson's material. Amazing, a must-have. You have to do it. Back to the Crow, Graham Revell. Amazing soundtrack, really dark. If you're playing Vampire the Masquerade or Ravenloft, anything that you want to sort of convey that dark feel. This is just an old school film. There are many other films that have soundtracks like that. Narnia, the Narnia collection. Yeah, take a look at it. Amazing. Harry Gregson Williams composing. Fantastic stuff. Prince Caspian is probably one of my favorites to put on. Back to Hans Zimmer with The Last Samurai. Love the soundtrack. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's really great. The Wolfman. Yes. Halloween themed games, anything kind of menacing. You're doing Ravenloft again. You're doing anything that uses maybe classic monsters that we would consider Halloween sort of type material. You know, of course, lycanthropes and vampires and things of that nature. Wonderful soundtrack. Same with Sleepy Hollow, Danny Elfman, a powerhouse soundtrack. Really amazing. Highly recommend it. Gladiator. Amazing. Some of these are going to make the top 10 for sure, the top 5. I'm just going to cycle through a lot of them just to give you an idea of the soundtracks that I've used. Prince of Persia, again, Harry Gregson Williams, same as Narnia, amazing material. And again, if you're going for that sort of Arabian feel, or maybe from second edition people, if you're running Al-Qadim by chance, an amazing soundtrack for that. Back to Danny Elfman, Planet of the Apes. I've used several bits off of this. Maybe it wasn't the most well-received version of Planet of the Apes. I actually quite like it. And again, I'm a Danny Elfman nut. So amazing soundtrack. Lord of the Rings. Yeah, for sure. Two Towers, unbelievable. Great tracks on there. Game of Thrones, all of it. Use it, listen to it. They're amazing. Ramin Djawadi, I think that's how you say his name. Amazing soundtracks. Inception, back to Hans Zimmer. Percy Jackson, The Lightning Thief. Christoph Beck, yeah, this is good. I mean, it's lighthearted, but you can really use this in your games. Howard Shore, The Hobbit, awesome. And then Batman Begins, I talked a bit about it earlier with my vinyl copy of The Dark Knight Rises. These are the CD copies that I have of James Newton Howard and Hans Zimmer doing Batman Begins, and of course Hans with the other two films by Christopher Nolan for the Batman trilogy. Unreal. I find them very useful in D&D. It's superhero music, but I use it in my Dungeons & Dragons games. This one is great. This is James Newton Howard doing M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. This is got some creepy stuff on it. Vikings. If you haven't seen the show, you got to see the show. It's fantastic. Highly recommend it. So Viking soundtrack, if you can grab them, or use Spotify, grab a list or a playlist. Avatar, this is fantastic. James Horner, it's got a wonderful theme to it. Definitely use it if you're doing like a druid based campaign or a wilderness campaign. I find it very it sort of emotes that kind of environment, at least for me anyways. Back to Game of Thrones, amazing. Vikings, King Arthur, there it is again. I use it all the time. It's not a long score, only 7 tracks, Hans Zimmer, but very effective. This is going back a while. So Waterworld relives, James Newton Howard, early material. But again, great music when you're out on the waves. If you're doing a game where you're out on the waves, it's fantastic. Speaking of waves, Black Sails, great TV show. I don't know if you've seen it. One of the heroes, actually, Mike picked this up for me, so thanks, Mike. This is amazing by Bear McCreary. Prometheus. Yeah, creepy. The Alien soundtracks are really, really neat. All of them. And they're very creepy. I definitely believe you can use them in D&D, but also in your science fiction games, for sure. So this takes me back. So these little CDs I used to pick up. So once I started playing CDs in games, I quickly realized, well, hey, you know, these soundtracks are providing the adventure music, but what about the background music for where you are? So I picked up these really corny relaxation CDs. This is going way back. And I would use 2 CD players, and I would play one soundtrack in the room and the environmental soundtrack as well, and just create a little mix with the volume, and away you go. So you can have ocean surf in the background while listening to something else. This added a lot. This was sort of a big deal when I started doing that. And I know today you can use all kinds of online programs and to be able to make your own mix, Sirenscape and whatnot. And we will probably do videos about that in the future, but this is just showing the evolution of where the heroes has come in terms of doing all this. 300, amazing score. Tyler Bates, check out Tyler Bates, everything he's done, it's amazing. 300, an amazing score for your games. Pirates of the Caribbean, all of them, fantastic. Hans Zimmer, I'm using it all the time in my Pirates game. Dead Man's Chest. This soundtrack, really neat. I love it so much, especially for role-playing moments. Maybe we'll do a video about that in the future too. Is not just maybe a top 10 best of, but maybe a video on how to put your playlist together based on mood. So creating playlists for action sequences and role-playing sequences, and you know, when the party is searching and when the party is feeling a sense of doom, you can organize all these tracks into categories like that. Ramin Djawadi, back to him again. Clash of the Titans. I like the remake. I love the original. I love the remake as well. I thought it was well done, and I think the soundtrack is great, very usable. This is one of the CDs in a 4-pack. Maybe I'll show you the 4-pack for Star Wars. I picked this up a long time ago. This is a box set that covers all 3 films and then extras from the original films. Unedited, unadjusted, just this is the way the music was meant to be heard. And on CD, this was a great box set. So for people running Star Wars, you got to have Star Wars music. Back to Narnia. Yep, amazing. Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I've used it. It's great. Lord of the Rings, of course. Pirates. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Amazing. This score is unbelievable. Check it out. I'm sure that we could probably do an entire video just in top 10ing, you know, the best sort of Asian sounding soundtracks. But maybe we'll do that in the future. But this is a wonderful soundtrack. Love it. This one is another one of those environmental CDs I picked up. And it had, waterfalls and wolves howling and this sort of thing. So I would mix this with regular CD soundtracks, and it really added to it. Alien, we used to play this in Star Wars. There were a few tracks for our Star Wars adventures I'd use when the action got really heightened and the John Williams score just didn't quite work. So definitely check out the Alien soundtracks if you can. Kill Bill, I put this one in here, kind of goes against what we're talking about today because we're not supposed to be talking about songs. We're talking about soundtracks and scores. I guess this is a soundtrack using, I mean, Quentin Tarantino uses, all kinds of amazing tracks and completely changes the way you hear that song based on the imagery that you're seeing. So I think it's a great example of how a filmmaker can use, music and just completely tie you into what's going on. I don't see any difference in role-playing experiences for that matter. You are imagining it in your mind, and music is just another art form to bring you closer to what's going on. But check out Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill. Check out all of his films to see what I'm talking about on that one. Village, again, James Newton Howard, powerhouse composer. Just M. Night Shyamalan, The Village. Really creepy stuff here if you're using it in games of intrigue or mystery, puzzle solving. Troy, pretty epic. James Horner here, and I've used this many times. It's got some great battle music. Love it. This is another one of those old school environmental scores I've grabbed way back to sound like a desert. I mean, this is what I did. I used to mix them by having multiple CD players going on at one time. Howard Shore, Hobbit, amazing. Grabbed Maleficent, James Newton Howard, right? So can't go wrong. Disney's Maleficent, great soundtrack. Alien Covenant, really creepy stuff on this one actually, by Jed Kurzel. This is or Kurzel. This is great. Highly recommend it. Game of Thrones, Hobbit, and Phantom Menace. I used Duel of the Fates. I mentioned earlier Duel of the Fates. I think, yeah, Duel of the Fates on this one, and it's an incredible track. And very effective, I would say, in many role-playing games. But now let's get to the top 10. Okay, so this was incredibly hard to do for me to whittle down even a top 10 for movie scores, film scores to put into a list here for you guys. But I did. Honorable mentions will be first. Let me see if I can get to that quickly here. First honorable mention was Waterworld for me. Amazing. Again, give it a go. It's awesome. James Newton Howard. Honorable mention for The Last Samurai. Love this soundtrack. It is so good. King Arthur, honorable mention. Only 7 soundtrack or 7 tracks on it, but check it out. The Vikings TV show material, please have a listen to it. It is awesome for your games. Definitely check it out. The Count of Monte Cristo, honorable mention for sure. Love this one, really effective, great role-playing moments. You got to check it out. And the recent Mummy, Tom Cruise, Brian Tyler. This one's good. Check it out for your games. A lot of great music in this one. And now we'll get to the top 10. So top 10 soundtracks and film scores for Dungeons & Dragons games and RPG in general. Warcraft. This soundtrack rocks. It is amazing, beginning to end, every track. Fantastic. If you can always find a place for this music in your game. That's number 10. Number 9, Clash of Titans, Ramin Djawadi. It's great, beginning to end, guys. This is a great soundtrack. Use it. 300. Number 8. Number 8, 300. Music by Tyler Bates. Fantastic. Love this movie. Love the graphic novel. Amazing. Number 7, Prince of Caspian. Yeah, this one. More lighthearted, but definitely usable. It's got great action music and great music in general. Check this one out. Number 6, Sleepy Hollow. Love this soundtrack. Danny Elfman. Use it for many games. Really creepy stuff. Wonderful to get your characters spooked out. Number 5, Gladiator. This soundtrack is so incredibly beautiful. It's amazing. I knew nothing about this film when I saw it in the theater, and the soundtrack blew my mind. It just was amazing. And there is an addendum, I think, to this soundtrack too. So like part 2, maybe we can throw that in a video sometime. See if I can track it down. Number 4, Pirates of the Caribbean. The entire franchise, check it out. But particularly Curse of the Black Pearl. The music is great. It encapsulates the theme of the entire series. Great tracks in it to use in your games. Great action. Highly recommend it. Number 3 was The Dark Knight by Hans Zimmer. This is an amazing soundtrack. Use all 3 of the film soundtracks. The Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, but certainly The Dark Knight is my favorite and my number 2. Love this soundtrack. Definitely check it out. And again, you'll be surprised at how well this material fits with your D&D games. My number 2 is The Two Towers, Lord of the Rings, Howard Shore, the entirety of the film scores for this Lord of the Rings trilogy, and of course The Hobbit 2. Use it, but The Two Towers is my personal favorite. And my number 1, I don't own. My number 1 is Bram Stoker's Dracula by, I think it's Wojciech Kilar. Again, I'm probably butchering the name, but it is an amazing soundtrack. Maybe I can do a little editing and put a picture on this if I can find it. It's amazing. It's really great. Highly recommend it for any of your games. And so please check out Bram Stoker's Dracula at any time. Really spooky. Just an unbelievable soundtrack for your games, for the environment, to get your players spooked and into it. Okay, so that is Jack's top 10 with honorable mentions for movie soundtracks and scores. Leave us a comment down below if you can think of any others that are your favorite in the movie soundtrack and film score sort of category. That'd be great to hear from you. Maybe we can do it in video and add on some more fantastic soundtracks to recommend for people. And certainly, you know, buying them on CD and owning them on vinyl, that's probably not a reasonable thing for people to be doing in their games. So we are going to do a video talking about Spotify and how you get all of your soundtracks there, or many of them, and start folding in playlists and things that you can use in your games, as well as a number of other tools you can use. So we'll stay tuned for that. There'll be a lot more on music and Dungeons & Dragons role-playing games from Heroes of. Anyway, hope you liked the video, and yeah, we can talk soon. Cheers.